Hey everyone, welcome back to the Stay on Your Bike podcast. This is going to be another super interesting episode. I'm very excited for this one to chat to a really good friend of mine that I don't see too often, but when I see him, we always have a really good laugh and a good crack because we're two old fellas. And he's done a lot of stuff in the industry. And yeah, I'd like to introduce Todd Schumlick to the podcast. Todd, how bad did I pronounce your name then?
That was pretty much spot on. I mean, you've got JC as a reference.
Yeah, yeah. So
Well, I mean, it's Schumlack and I'm Schumlick, so I got the lick in there. He's got the lack in there.
lick and lack, good stuff. Cool. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, thanks very much for coming on. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you. Well, first of all, you were just telling me now, but give all the listeners and viewers a little insight on where you're based at the moment.
Based here in Gibsons, British Columbia, so Canada, obviously, and uh, basically, I guess it's often referred to as the Sunshine Coast. Not so much today, but yeah, we're kind of near the Coastal Gravity Park sort of area. I'm about 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers from there. Seminuk lives that way about 3, 4 miles. So we got Brandon up here. A few other sort of riders have been from this area as well. Like Magnus Manson used to be in this area. Forrest Oresco's still here. So yeah, there's a few in the coastal crew and all that. So yeah, Gracie Hemstreet also here with obviously the family has Coastal Gravity Park. So we're a ferry ride across. It's not an island. It's still part of the mainland. Often people think it's the island, but Vancouver Island's over there, about 30 kilometers. So
And is have you got like riding pretty much from your doorstep?
yeah, I mean, it's a little more, we moved here from, as you know, from Pemberton and Squamish, which I guess often people think of as the Mecca when it comes to British Columbia riding. And you could ride, obviously the trailheads were right at my door. So now I'm a bit, I was a bit spoiled. I guess here I gotta, it's the convenience of an e-bike, right? Just, you know, I can blitz through the town in about, actually I timed it a couple days ago. It was like 13 minutes to get through the town and get up to the trailhead. And then you're into the trails. And yeah, you basically are riding out the door, I guess you could say. I don't have to get in my truck, which is awesome. I think that's always a great bonus.
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Cool. Well, so obviously we're at the end of the another race season. Um, the downhill's just finished, the enduro's finished. We've just watched the crazy antics at Red Bull Rampage, which you've just mentioned. The winner of that, Brandon Semenuk, lives close by to you. Um, what is what do you do mainly this time of year? Do you have a little bit of downtime after the season, or are you straight back into training athletes and stuff?
Well, it's, the one, as a reminder, I wear, I guess two hats. You've worn a few hats too. I mean, this industry, we know it. We're old dogs. I don't know about you, but I have to consider myself having, half a brain at best these days. And so we got to do a few jobs my two jobs obviously have always been, it's been 31 years for PerformX Training. So the training business, the fitness, nutrition, the mental side of it, which is my background with the kinesiology and exercise physiology and sports nutrition and sports psych that I took in school. And the other hat is obviously the one where you and I always had good chats and as well, the race team management, ownership, which has been, this will be 13 years this year. And I've been on both sides. We started as the small race team. First year was some a wanker named Remy Gouvet. Kidding. Great guy. And we started that PerformX, what was it, Evil program. It was just a development program, uh, was motivated by pretty much Stevie Smith, because that was the year I started training Stevie Smith, which was my real entry into the mountain bike scene. And anyways, I guess you didn't ask me about my history, but I'm just
Oh,
sort of
well, I want.
giving you an idea. Like, I mean, yeah. So, the mountain bike thing grew from this small program to eventually PerformX Common Cell, which was I was manager owner of, and then that turned into Norco Factory Racing, which was I was the uh, you know, owner manager of that program. And then when that moved on, we went to the Intense Factory Racing program with Gwin and just managed that program. He was owner of that team. And then after a few years, we moved it to the Gwin Racing program, which we are currently in with Crestline. So back to your original question, yeah, like what do we do in this time of year? So it's both things, like you said, athletes right now, yeah, full on with athletes. They typically, I mean, some people have finished up in the season in the last month because I've got 80%, 85% mountain bike athletes, and those are gravity athletes. So almost split between downhill and enduro athletes. And then 15% of my clients right now, or 20%, I would say right now this year, are various action sports. So some ski athletes, kayak, motocross or moto. So we have some athletes there as well. So not everybody is finished their season, or some have finished it, a while ago. So a majority of my athletes are finished up now their race season, and we're now in the mode of setting dates, restarting. Some have already started. Those keeners that are, maybe they had already a couple weeks off after the season and they want to get going again. So what I do is sort of organize to whether they're going to travel to me to Gibson's, and quite a few are. I was just arranging with, one of the guys, Richie Rude, this morning to come out here. He'll stay. I mean, he loves BC, so it's pretty easy I don't have to twist his arm. So he'll come out here, and I'd say 50% of my athletes will travel out here. And then we'll use this, let's call it lab or gym, whatever you want to, cool name you want to give it, but the gym. And we use this for our testing. So I'll do their testing here, their fitness testing, their mobility testing, do a lot of exercise orientation so that I can get a baseline for them, give them some instruction, and then send them on their way so they can go home. And as I often say with our training, like I just give them the recipe and they have to sort of bake the cake, so to speak. So I don't, they don't really stay here and train with me all that long. It's more just an orientation and testing. So right now it's pretty much, yeah, kind of kicked off this week. And we have had, some ask and they say, how long a break do you recommend? And I think it's a little bit physical, but I just think some of it's just a mental thing. If they feel like you can get a feel, how it is. You can tell some athletes just want to get home to their families and they just want to have a break from the sport, from the industry. And so I kind of try and feel it out. And otherwise, the race team stuff, well, that's a whole other, well, that's the training part is there. We introduced a lot of new stuff this year. I got a guy that works for me, Addison Bain, and he was out here for a while, and we were trying to reinvent ourselves all the time and study as much sports science as possible, learn from the past, and try and better ourselves. But say the race team thing, which I'm sure you're, I haven't even asked you recently where you're with it all, but it's with these new changes with Warner Brothers, WBD, and the UCI and that whole thing, which that's a whole other conversation. It's definitely challenging, and it's I don't want to say in a negative way or a positive way. It's got both sides, but it's challenging, and we're trying to figure it out. Like, where do we go? Like, I think for the big teams, right? It's pretty much maybe more like status quo, right? Just rolling over into another year, a little more cost. But those teams that are on the fringe, those teams that are the budgets are more limited, the rider selection is more limited for the points it's tricky right now. So we're trying to navigate through that. No hard decisions have been made at this time, which is, as you know, super weird to be in October. I mean, it's almost the end of October, or I guess it's middle end, and not, have everything sort of set up already. Usually this is already too late to be organizing anything, but yeah, I mean, hope that's not too long of an answer, but that's where I'm at right now. So
No, not at all. And obviously, there's a lot of things I want to ask you about all the different things that you've done and you do. But um, the where you just mentioned, you're always trying to, reinvent yourself and learn, and to come up with new programs for your athletes. Where do you kind of look for, inspiration and new techniques? Where do you find those? And then obviously, do you speak to each individual athlete, and kind of find out where their weaknesses is and where they thought they were kind of, if they had any weaknesses in the racing and try and improve that by, the physicality and the mental side of things? Is it involved in all the different areas?
yeah, definitely. Like it's always a moving target with me. I think I look at, I'm very, I have, I try and be careful with this, Nige. It's just like you're like any of these things, there's some stuff that's good for business, and there's some stuff that's just legit, like it works, and you got to careful. When nowadays with social media, guys are dropping using their Instagram and their, I mean, all the various social platforms to other, raise your arms and say, hey, look at all this cool stuff I do. Um, I try and do it once in a while too. I'm always tried to be informative, but I'm the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, and less is more sometimes. And it's not, hopefully it's not seen as a lack of advancement, but I look at the guys that taught me, like the powerlifting guys and the basic strength coaches that still work in these big Olympic training centers. They just giggle at so much of this, you know, fancy training where people are either, I don't know, shoving a ping pong up the wrong orifice and standing on one leg, closing one eye, and and playing Scrabble at the same time. Like I try and not, it looks impressive on Instagram, but the reality is you can take this right here, these barbells and these plates right here, and you can apply it literally 100 different ways. And I can apply it in a way that develops strength, that develops endurance. Um, and so the advancements, I feel like the inspiration comes from the athletes on a year-to-year basis. And I think I watch what wiggles them along and what it seems to, from feedback, work. And it's not just a physical thing, it's like a mental thing. Like I think a lot of athletes come over, and I don't think I'm too far off with this, but a lot of them come in there always a bit surprised. I've got a lot of new athletes and sort of younger generation right now. It's the most I've seen in these 30 some years. And they're always sort of surprised by, it's not as much training, it's not as much duration, it's not as much volume as what they're used to. A lot of them have come from places where they're spending a lot of time, I think, doing a lot of spinning on bikes,
Yeah.
a lot of long workouts. I get athletes that tell me they're in the gym for 2 hours, and I'm like, wow, that's that's pretty gnarly to me. I mean, they come over to me and they go to something like 3 to 4 workouts in the gym per week for anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour, and that's pretty low to them compared to what they did. Um, I like to sort of, like I say, focus on those basics, but also look at the individual, and you can see their body type,
Yeah.
ectomorph, endomorph, and then the mesomorph, the one in between, the real athletic person. And then also listen, they do an application with me, and then they fill in a questionnaire, and I kind of listen to their strengths and weaknesses, and I read through it. And then I also do a phone, usually interview with them, and I make some notes about where they're, and you're realizing that you're not just trying to help them physically, you're really working with them mentally and emotionally. And if they can see stuff in their gym training where they're seeing themselves advance, I think it changes the mindset. I think it says to them, they're not where they were, they're further ahead. And by creating check marks in their training, whether it's fitness testing or whether it's a maximum strength test once in a while for the advanced athletes, a mobility test, which is huge for me, not just for how much they can move on the bike, but what they can handle in a fall. And we're asking them to push. We're asking them to find the limits on these bikes, the absolute limit. And so we got to convince them that they are durable, that they can handle it, that they can take a fall, that they can push the limits and they can survive it and come back and do it again. And so I'm kind of looking at the individuals, listening to this kind of the psyche, the psychology of them, and getting from their phone conversations and the questionnaire. I often think of it this way. It'd be like suspension. You and I have been around. And if we went to Fox or, SRAM or RockShox, we're not going to convince them to completely reinvent the fork for us. Not only would it not be economical, but it would make no sense because they got so much time into that product. They know that a 40 mil tube and a stanchion and the clamps and everything, it's not just like, oh, it's the easy way out. No, they have figured out with a little bit of time that is the right amount of compliancy. That's the right, all those details, but they will individually set up the damping. So they'll say, okay, you need a little more compression. I know that like a Dakota Norton runs his forks completely different than than an Aaron Gwin. And they can run the same fork structure, but you might dampen it slightly different. And then you valve it and then you test and you see how you can tweak it and so on. I think I think of the training that way sometimes. There's a basic structure. If somebody comes to me and they say, oh, I don't really like I don't like barbells or I don't like deadlifts. I'll be like, well, I'm going to try and convince you otherwise. Maybe you've done it wrong in the past. Maybe you've approached it wrong. Maybe something has been instructed incorrectly. Let me give you at least a shot that you can do some of these movements. And whether it's rowing, whether it's, like I say, deadlifts or squats or something. But I sort of want them to do the basic stuff that I know kind of works. And then eventually you might have to tweak it for an injury or an issue with them biomechanically. But yeah, it takes a bit of time with an individual. I was saying this to a parent yesterday. We were talking about the programs, and somebody was, making me, I guess, feel good about myself, feeding my ego. They were saying, "Oh, we know you've trained a lot of the top athletes around there, and this and that." And I said, "Yeah, but you're making me sound like I might be the best guy out there because of my track record and all these athletes." And I said, "There's a lot of good people out there, and I don't think there is a best trainer.
Mhm.
I really don't believe there's a best coach. I don't believe there's a best bike. I don't believe there's anything." It's really hard to say that because an example would be, um, a restaurant. Supposedly Morton's Steakhouse or something in Vancouver is one of the best steakhouses, best restaurants in the world. Might beat all these awards, but my wife's a vegan, and I guarantee you she don't like that restaurant.
Yeah.
So, everybody's different. So I just say the same thing with athletes. I'm like, hey, if you're interested, you got drawn to me because you heard big riders' names like Aaron Gwin and Richie Rude and Stevie Smith, and I got, cool helmets sitting in my place for promotion, but let's have a chat and see if we're on the same page. See if what I'm suggesting in the way I work, if that works for you. It may not work for you. You might be the kind of person that needs to, grow to CrossFit, work in a group, get pushed a little bit more. Maybe
Yeah.
some people, need one-on-one trainers on a day-to-day basis. I don't work that way. And I don't look at things like that's the wrong way, this is the right way. I'm too old for that shit. I think that it's just this is the way it works for me. And so this time of year, I spend a bit more time. What has evolved more than anything for me is the time it takes to get to know the athlete. Like, make the time for a phone call. Make the time for a WhatsApp or a Skype and
Yeah.
get to know and maybe even chat, even sometimes with the family, with the parents.
Yeah.
See what their household is like, see what kind of environment you can introduce. This is what I make. This is what's probably evolved. And number two, I got a really great guy. This guy, Addison, I told you, this incredible guy, incredible. He's a younger, better looking, stronger version of me. All the above.
Impossible.
Um, yeah, it's all we need to do. That was easy to find. So, he's come from a incredible pedigree. Went overseas, went to Europe, raced road cycles, went to the pro level. Uh, you know, Turned himself into a 130-pound road cyclist in the back of a car and ate cans of tuna and all that kind of thing. Didn't get all the way, came home and entered into CrossFit and ended up becoming like a regional and national champion in CrossFit. And went to the opposite side, went from this really good endurance cardio machine to this real powerhouse strength guy. And had a background with moto with his brother. They grew up around the Dungies, Ryan Dungey, and so on. And he came to me like 6 or 7 years ago and was like, "Hey, I'd be interested in being involved in PerformX." So I used an old um, method that Rob Scott told me one time, Rob. And, Rob told me, I said, man, I went to Ritalik mountain biking with him once and we got kind of drunk in the bar one night, but enough that we were still could have good conversation. I said, man, I know you're a sharp dude. Like, I know you're pretty wise and I know you got a cool background with skateboarding and all these things you really boxes you check. But like, how did you build the syndicate to be such a powerhouse, like as a race team? And I watched the program and the people. He's like, dude, it's all about the people. It's all about the personality. It's the bike, the gear. He's like, you got to build the people. And he's like, if it's so true. He said, like, you hear stories about me. I require the athletes, whether it's Cedric in the past or Menard or Loris Vergier, any of these, he's like, they got to come and they got to hang with me. They got to come to the house. They got to spend some time. And it's not about whether I think they live up to my standards or the Santa Cruz standards or whatever. It's just I want to see if they feel like they're at home, whether
Yeah.
they feel like they can gel with the program. And to me, that's when you get the most out of people is when um, you're not trying to sell them on something. It's just very honest and it's very, and I think for me, that's the thing I'm most focused on. I get athletes and young ones and they get excited and they go to the website and they see Richie Rude on there and they see Aaron Gwin and, and they hear of these big riders and the Finn Isles
Yeah.
but I just tell them like, I know, just make your own decision. Don't based on that because I might just be a good salesman, like talk, get to know. There's a lot of great guys out there who are
Yeah.
doing this job as well. And that's probably the biggest part that is evolved for me with the athletes. And I love it. I mean, I sit here and it's like my books are almost all psychology. Like, I'm into this really good book right now. It's called, Think Fast, Think Slow. And it's so relative to mountain biking and decision making. And it's not just deep psychology. Some of it's just really fun. And it's like, this is an incredible book with this Canadian astronaut who
Yeah.
shouldn't have made it as an astronaut. He was not that incredible. He wasn't that incredibly talented.
Yeah.
Definitely a book I always suggest. But he talked about how he used a strategy to become one of the most influential, successful astronauts of all time. Like he's been to the International Space Station more than almost any other astronaut. And he doesn't check any incredible boxes. He laughs about it. He says all these guys at NASA were always stronger, bigger, smarter. And yet he's been one of the most successful. And it seems like it's surrounding himself with good people, attitude, and yeah. So it's I get out there and look at the science, the real dry, boring shit, how to
Yeah.
make the knee, better for mountain biking, and at the same time I'm looking at things that take vibration out of the bike, these counter shock group.
Yeah.
So I'm over here. This is my latest stuff I'm researching, how to make the bike work better so that the athlete doesn't even actually have to physically work as hard. Plus, I'm looking at how to make the athlete stronger, more efficient. And then over here, it's like the brain, the psychology, and then, reflex tools, you know, how much nutrition do we really need, protein to see whether we're effectively. So if I just look at my table right now, it's pretty much just the latest things I'm working on and trying to understand without getting caught up in too much of the fads, the gimmicks. I hate to say it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And so things evolve all the time. Like the bikes have evolved, the styles of tracks have evolved, the riders have evolved. When I sort of started mountain biking in my mid 20s, I did a little bit of motocross before I started the mountain biking, which I think helped with the natural, the speed and the rough terrain. But as a young person, I used to go to the gym and just do basic exercises at the gym. Exercises for my shoulders, my arms, my legs, whatever. Um, and that's basically what kind of gym work I did. I didn't have a coach, but I just kind of knew I needed to be stronger to hold on to the bike. Um, do you think, obviously now it's everything's evolved and there's specialist exercises in the gym that many trainers are saying, this is what you have to do for mountain biking. If you want to be a better mountain biker, you've got to do this exercise. And how much do you think has that evolved? I mean, is it the be all and end all to do a specific type of exercises, or do you think just strength and conditioning, most parts of your body in the gym is going to help, help with racing and taking hits, like you say, crashing and recovery and stuff like that?
Dude, this is such a good question. You could, in my opinion, you could hire no trainer. You don't like, I'm very sometimes bad for business for myself. I think a trainer could be a lot of times, including myself, could be overrated for some athletes. I don't know if everybody needs a trainer. Everybody needs a bike coach. I think a lot of people could go out there. You could YouTube some exercises. You could do some. In fact, forget the gym. Probably just get yourself a really laborious job.
Yeah,
You can go out and build brick walls and do shit physical,
yeah,
push and pull and push wheelbarrows up a hill and make money while you're doing it instead
yeah,
of spending money at the gym.
yeah.
So I think you could get pretty far with that.
Mhm.
And I think you could do that and probably strengthen yourself mentally and emotionally because you're investing, you're working. Some boss is going to yell at you if you don't do it. And
Yeah,
I don't know, there could be a benefit there. I think what's evolved, what worked for me is I'll start with the brand. It's PerformX. It's not MX.
yeah.
So many people think they've seen because I started in motocross, there's an MX reference.
Mhm.
It's not. I went to university and I was very fortunate. When I went to, university, I really sat in the front of the room. I was a shitty high school student, but when I went to college, it was like, okay, my parents were, I always thank them. They made me put skin in the game. I paid for part of my college. I had to sell my truck. I remember it. And I invested. And, smart on them. As much as I hated that at the time, I didn't recognize it. But I sat in the front of that room and I was like, man,
I've
I
got it.
just paid. I better learn this shit. And what else am I going to do? So I sat there in the front, and this professor, um, Dr. Reese, he really picked up on it, and he seen I was interested. He probably seen I only had half a brain, and I was asking some extra questions and stuff. But I would ask him about, he was an exercise physiology guy, and I would ask him like questions like, "Hey, well, listen, if strength exercises are pushing and some are pulling, shouldn't you, if you if the legs can push a certain amount, shouldn't they be able to pull a certain amount? Because if you look at every muscle group, our bicep, our tricep, our quadricep, our hamstring, our forearm flexor, extensor,
Yeah.
everything's got an opposite. Our pecs are rhomboids, so we push and pull everywhere in our body. It's probably some human evolution, so we can climb up a tree and down it and whatever, do work. And I
Yeah.
was like, well, if we can do this, and you're saying, and athletes are saying, I should have a certain amount of bench press or a squat or a deadlift. Shouldn't you be able to do a certain amount to the opposite? Wouldn't it make sense anatomy or physiology wise? And I said, so he's saying, so you're saying if you should be able to do X, shouldn't you be able to do Y? And I was like, yes. And he said, oh, so after a while in class, he called me Mr. PerformX. And he'd
Yeah.
say, hey, what do you think, Mr. PerformX? And it was like, I don't know, 10 years later before I used the brand,
Yeah.
because I started a gym and I moved back to Canada after school in California. And I went to a really I went to Canmore, Alberta, and it was just a few years after the Olympics there. And there was a lot of athletes left over from the Olympics who stayed there. And I had all these world-class athletes, and we opened this gym, and they would come and they would use the facility and they would want some advice. And I was this kinesiology guy, and it was this thing, it was kind of new. Nobody knew what it was. I honestly didn't even know what kinesiology was going to do for me. I was hoping I wouldn't be like a lab rat guy, but I used all these ideas from kinesiology, and I was able to apply it to real world-class athletes. And also I had some NHL hockey players, professional hockey players, and luckily, my parents were still in a community with a lot of NHL players and top guys in the world. I had like 8 big clients. So I started applying these theories of if they could push a certain amount, shouldn't they be able to pull? So even in their, like, let's say as a skater, their groin, their adductor versus their abductor, which would be their like glutes. Shouldn't they have a balance? If they're just getting really strong one way from their sport, couldn't that cause some dysfunction? Couldn't that cause some injury?
Yeah.
Couldn't that cause some imbalances? So I started applying this stuff and it seemed to be working. So I said, okay, PerformX seems to work. So lo and behold, I was like, you said about moto, little quick history again. Hopefully it's not too boring, but
No.
I went to, I was like, okay, I'm making a little bit of money now. I had the gym, I paid some bills. I'm gonna get a motocross bike. I always wanted to. I grew up as BMX like you, and I was like, but I went from the age of probably 18 to 30, just broke as a joke, and school and debt and opening a business, and I had no time for this kind of like fun stuff. I had a mountain bike at college to ride up and down. I didn't, but it wasn't really mountain biking. It was just transportation. But all of a sudden 30 hit and I was like, okay, what do I want to do for fun now? I'm going to get a moto. So I got a moto. And anyways, I went to a motocross race in the first few months, and somebody there recognized me and they said, you work with some NHL hockey players. And it's like, yeah. And he said, well, you ever thought about working with a motocross athlete? I said, honestly, no, I'm just started at this. So somehow I got propelled directly to working with one of the top motocross guys and snowmobile racing guy in the world, Blair Morgan.
Wow.
And Blair Morgan was like connection to you somehow because he was 6-time X Games gold medalist,
Yeah.
should
Yeah.
say, and he was up against Palmer. So Palmer was coming over and racing that snowcross thing, and I was going to X Games with, I went with Blair and um, got into the action sports really quickly because all of a sudden here I'm working with this guy that's almost as big as Sean White at the Winter Games. And he's introducing me to all kinds of action sports athletes and primarily at the time, snowcross and motocross. I didn't know anything about mountain biking.
Yeah.
And even though I came from a BMX background, and so I just started working with moto and it kind of created my own market in Canada, like a ton of um, motocross athletes and, fast tracked me to point where Red Bull asked me if I would work with this kid named Stevie Smith, and they were like, "Hey, he's not really getting along with the guy we've got him set up with. It's not really working, the relationship." So this is an example. I know who this guy is. He's really good. Like he knows his shit, in my opinion. He's a really good trainer, but just the two of them, he was kind of like, "Hey, Stevie, you can't drink beer and eat chips, and you gotta be like hardcore." And I knew that probably, well, after I met with him, I knew that wasn't going to work with Stevie. So, the Red Bull guys were like, "Hey, would you like to chat with him?" And I think the conversation was they called Stevie and they said, "Hey, we got this guy that works in motocross."
Mhm.
And Red Bull was contracting me for some of their top moto guys. And they said, "Would you like to chat with him?" So we had a chat and he asked me, and I said, "Let's go meet in Vancouver." I was up in Pemberton and we went for sushi. And I remember in Vancouver, and I was just like, why is it not working for you with this other guy?
Yeah.
And started questioning him, and he was like, "I don't want to do this and that." And Darren was giving him advice, which was cool. Like, you got to work hard, dude. Like, you
Yeah.
got to be a grinder and all these things. So we just chatted. And I said, "Well, here's what I'd propose. Here's what I approached." He kind of also was getting some help from other people too. And there was a lot of like stationary biking and lots of hours. And I was like, "Well, I'll be honest with you, dude. It's like this downhill thing's a little new to me. I'm trying to figure it out, but I'm looking at the sport." And I went to a race with him and I was like testing his like efforts, heart rate,
Mhm.
all these things. And I was like, "This is a lot like moto. You
Yeah.
you got to use upper body and you got to do these things that way." So to me, I was, using moto sort of technique and making it evolve with Stevie. And we were sort of making it work. We were just making it, evolve as we went along. And I remember year to year, and I remember like Red Bull asked me, like, the guys there were like, "What do you think of this kid? Like, is he winning material and is he capable?" And I was like, because they knew I would kind of help them with sort of aptitude stuff, so like the mental side and stuff. And I was like, "Yeah, I think, you know, give him 5 or 6 years and this guy's going to be champion." I mean, with the kind of the ingredients he has mentally.
Yeah.
And somehow just guessed, right? Just a fluke, just trying to give him a number. But 6 years later, together, he won the championship.
Yeah.
And, we did that. But I looked at how it evolved those year by year. Every year we were like, I would put him on the moto with me and we would go out and ride and we would do downhill. And then I would listen to him and a lot of feedback. But back to a little bit how that process of perform X and Y. So I've got this theory with the training that, well, first of all, yeah, you do anything like we talked about, you do some labor, you go get a working job, you push wheelbarrows and stuff. I believe you're going to get your fitness pretty high. And I think you're going to get yourself mentally pretty strong. And I think that's huge because you're committing, you're doing work, you're getting comfortable at being uncomfortable. Now, I think there's a point where you're just not going to evolve anymore because you're not, um, let's say, doing something specific enough. So my training with this perform X and Y, I do a lot of testing with athletes because I do believe that a big part is to develop the balance between, like I told you, these push and pull muscle groups. And
Yeah.
the reason that I think it's so important is not just for the durability, it's for the athlete to have a career. Because to me, you're building your performance and your speed. You're not trying to win in the gym.
Yeah.
Like, let's not. We're trying to win on the bike. And to me, the more time I can give them, if I train them and they feel that they can practice more often, they can race more often, they're less injured. I feel that's where they're evolving as a racer because they're on their bike and they're racing and they're riding and the training complements that so that they can do more and their speed is coming up because of the hours they're putting into their craft, their racecraft. So to me, I'm trying to get the training so it doesn't wear them out. It develops that ability to handle punishment. It also, the biggest focus for me where it's evolved, it evolved before the mountain bike thing. In the moto thing, I realized the importance of developing position and posture. Alignment, I mean, you know, you still haven't, you're still a young chicken over there, so you don't know that. But,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, as we get older, right, we see this thing, and I look at people and they start getting, bad posture, their necks, their backs, the body's getting weaker. So it's typically losing alignment.
Yes.
And to me, you look at the best riders in the world right now. You look at moto and you look at the Lawrence brothers. Let's just pick Jet Lawrence and you pick Chase Sexton. You know what you see. You see this really good posture, this hip hinging. They're not rounding their backs. Their not shoulders aren't rolling over. They look like they walk through the pits and they look like, I hate to say robots, but they look like really strong athletes. And they got asses
Yeah.
and they got pecs, they got their shoulders back and they're walking around. And it's not just like attitude, it's like this is the way they're built, and you see them on the bike. And you realize that the training, well, I do, the training to me has got to be a big component to develop that alignment and posture. So I'm never in the gym just trying to like, let's get as much deadlift weight and bench press weight and squat. Not necessarily. I want to make sure that there's a balance between these groups. And then these balances, I think, develops also this better alignment and posture. And then the rider can position themselves better. And that's probably what's evolved and taught me the most. Getting their shoulders really, really healthy. You were talking about, you used to just go in the gym and lift some weights for your shoulders and do things that we know as mountain bikers. Once those shoulders start to go, because they're a very shallow joint and they're easily exposed to injury because, again, a bit of theory, but I see it in athletes when we fall, which we do if we're going to get fast on these bikes, we're putting our arms out because we are protecting our heads. We're protecting our organs. We don't want to we don't lawn dart, hopefully, into the ground. We're out there doing this. Hence why us old cats have things like, scaphoids that are broken,
Yeah.
triceps that are cut off,
Yeah. Yeah.
shoulders that have multiple surgeries. And it's not like, I'm not trying to show off, but it's like,
Yeah.
it's not like badges of honor. No, but it's proof that we are old enough, we've done these things like BMX and moto and now mountain bikes, is that if you're going to advance in this sport, for the most part, you're eventually going to have some falls. So the training to me has got to make you more durable. It's got to allow for punishment, and it's not just padding you up. I'm amazed by even what I think really sharp people in the industry. I get people come up and say, "Oh, guys got to get a little bit bulkier. You get to get some muscle, like Richie Rude, and he'll be more of a you know you know muscle protection." But it's not. I wouldn't agree with that. I think to just I really focus on, not only does that come from having some strength to support a fall, but it also comes from you have to have mobility. So your joint can actually move a lot of range so
Yeah.
that you'll actually, because I can see people who, you know what it's like if you've had a knee injury. If you have a knee injury, you'll ride, but you ride really tentative. You know that you're like, like it's not hurting me on the bike. I'm fine, but I know if I fall, I know if I have to jump off the bike right now, it's going to hurt like hell. And it could damage my knee further or my shoulder. So you're kind of doing it psychologically too for the athlete. You're saying like, it's getting better. You're stronger. You can handle some punishment. And then you've kind of also moving into part two of that, which is the posture and the position. To me, that allows for you, like you said, the bikes are evolving. We're seeing them probably getting, I guess the simple thing would be slacker and longer. And I think that's just the nature of the tracks. Tracks are opening up. Think about it, years of use,
Yeah.
they're gonna get wider, they're gonna get faster. It's just, and so that, and also it's more exciting, I think, for whatever made for TV and certain things that they're doing for it. And so the body has to evolve with that. And I think the rider really positioned that sweet spot, finding the center on the bike where your hips are good. Like I always said, like when I moved over from Stevie and, worked with Stevie and then, with Aaron, with Gwin, everybody saw that Gwin style of riding when he was, strong. And it wasn't just elbows up, but it was a really strong low position on the bike. And I reminded people that that's your low center of gravity. So that's better in corners and flat corners and stuff, but you're also in that position. You're also even got better visual. You're closer to the ground. If you think about the vestibular, even advantages, you have a better ability to, that's, my theory. There's a lot of, when you're in that position, you've got more room for movement because you're low, so you can come out of that position. You're not stuck already extended. So you have room to move in various situations, but it's also unlocking things. If you're tilting at the hip or hinging at the hip, you keep your back in alignment. And if you keep your back in alignment, your shoulders can stay back. And if your shoulders can stay back, then you have use of your shoulder blades and your strong upper back, and you can let your arms get loose. If we're hunched a little bit and our shoulders go here, it's just sports science. Your shoulder is unstable here because you don't have your shoulder blade anchoring your arm. So if your arm is kind of shoulders a bit loose, I believe you're going to grip more. And I believe you're going to grip to grab stability. And then your forearms are going to get jacked up and you're going to have lack of bite control. And you're going to get scared because you're like, oh my gosh, I can't feel the ground. I don't feel, and then we got forearm pump issues and stuff. So coming from moto, arm pump is just a huge factor. And you think it's bad there, you should see it in snowcross where I started. Snowcross is terrible because the vibration of the machines. And I was the guy that had to come in and try and figure out how to kind of remove arm pump from a lot of riders. If you could just do that, you were way ahead. So I started applying those same things like posture, position. And I think that position, and Stevie was really solid in his body position too. And then I just saw that evolution that Aaron taught me equally. I watched him and I was like, okay, Aaron's figured this out. Like get really low, charge. You could see like he always had like, let's say trap muscles, and deltoid muscles. And he could kind of, he doesn't have these massive forearms, but he didn't have to deal with forearm issues. And he could ride the bike a little more forward, get more grip. We could go on about bike riding, coaching, but, and now with me coaching with Aaron joining us at these mountain bike camps as a coach and watching him coach people along with Johan Borelli in our camps, man, I'm just like, okay, this is what's evolving in my training. I'm looking at what we were doing and I'm thinking, yeah, we're on the right page here. Let's just do even more of this. Let's get these athletes so they can really support this position. So the training it's doing that as well. So it's like most people think we're lifting weights to get build some muscle, get strong. And I mean, in simple ways, I guess that's it. But I don't really focus on bulking up an athlete. I'm not interested in whether they gain or lose weight much. I do a lot of testing where I try and increase their weight to horsepower. So their weight is typically often that's genetics, that's body type. I didn't make Richie Rude the way he looks. Richie Rude was made that way because of mom and dad, genetics. But when Richie started with me, I was like, dude, you're a big kid. And I remember somebody asking me, I remember one time Sven Martin said to me, Sven's like, dude, he doesn't lift weights really, does he? Like he doesn't need to. And I'm like, why do you think that? And he's like, well, look how big he is. And he's like endurance machine. You probably just have him doing tons of road cycling. And I'm like, you'd be shocked, but it's actually the opposite. He needs to be strong because his weight is heavy and his strength. And the more he supports himself at ease with more strength, the more we increase power. And power is the number one equation that I work on. So if I just talked about the injury prevention first and the durability, second being this body position and this balance in muscles, which also affects both sides, your injury prevention, because your knee joint will be safer and so on, and your body position and alignment. And the third aspect would be the strength part, the physicality, the conditioning, the physiology behind it, which is the strengthening component, the endurance component. And you start to realize when these athletes can support themselves more, they're using less of their maximum capacity, and that's what increases endurance. So I see a lot of athletes who are trying to achieve, especially in enduro, when you and I were running around with, EWS, a lot more with you. A lot of athletes who thought the best way to endurance was to do more enduring or endurance work. It's like I don't agree with that. A lot of the athletes just needed to have a better support system, more strength, so they because if you look it up, if you just Google search power, it's
Yeah.
just force over distance over time. So force being strength. So then you can, if you do certain work like get your cardiovascular system more capacity, aerobically or anaerobically, it will support that strength system, which then in turn, if you do the equation, creates more power. And power is ultimately for gravity. No, and I shouldn't say that. For every sport in the world, I don't care if you're a ping pong player, hockey player, mountain biker, XC, or downhiller, really everybody needs to improve, athletics needs to improve um, power, and in different increments, in different requirements. Obviously, 100-meter sprinter requires a different type of power than a marathon
Yeah.
runner.
Yeah.
They both require power, and they both require it in a different capacity. So yeah, again, I kind of go deep into these questions because
Good.
yeah, it's like, maybe I don't even know if that was the question you asked, but it's like this is the how I evolve. I'm like, if anything, yeah, I guess I'm super passionate about it, which wakes me up at this morning 5:30 to help out athletes. It's what I love, and I love to learn, and I love to read these books on my spare time and do research, and yeah, that's about it.
Good. And so obviously, you're training some athletes in in different sports and in different disciplines within mountain biking because we're mainly talking about mountain biking here. But you've got you mentioned Stevie Smith, you mentioned Aaron, you mentioned Richie. They're all super talented riders, but I would put them on the more just looking at them and the way they ride and how they attack the course and I would probably put say Loic Bruni in that same sort of uh, spectrum. Those guys are all kind of uh, average height, quite strong, strong looking guys. Um, Steve, even as a young person, Stevie was not a little skinny kid. He looked quite strong, and you could tell that in his riding and how he could hold on to the bike. Especially you've said again with Aaron Richie, kind of blew the physics of what, like you just said, you've answered this question that you think an endurance rider is going to be a bit skinnier and than say a downhill rider that's doing a short distance that needs a lot of strength to hold onto the bike. But then you've got Jackson Goldstone that pops up on the equation, who's doing as well as all them guys. I think that's one of the good things about downhill racing and enduro racing. There's people of all different sizes and weights and strength that have been able to be really good at the sport. So do when you get a new athlete come to you, does sometimes they say, oh, I feel like I've got to be all big and strong like Loic Bruni, for instance, or Aaron Gwin. Do you get a lot of that, or do people just come along and you kind of say, "This is me. I just want to improve myself."
Well, again, dude, excellent question. It's like first and foremost, I'll sit with an athlete and say, you're made the way you're made. I'm not going to change you much. We're not bodybuilding here. We're
Yeah.
not going to lift weights for muscle growth or hypertrophy, as we call it. We're not here to try and change the way you look. We're going to try and change the way you perform. Now, that's the first thing. Your body type is going to change very, in my opinion, minimally. You're not going to see a dramatic change in your body makeup. So let's look at that body type. And now I say to them, okay, now what they'll say, okay, so you're telling me this is the way I'm made and I can evolve it, I can change it a little bit. But what, Todd, what type of person becomes the best mountain biker in the world? Am I screwed because I'm not built like some of these guys to start with? Well, no, you're not screwed, I would say, in my opinion. But you're up against maybe a different kind of challenge, maybe in a sense that is there a the world's best gymnasts are born pretty much like the world's best gymnasts, right? They're not evolved into that. You're not getting somebody from the NBA or basketball league to go become a great gymnast, and vice versa. You're not going to see a extreme gymnast become a top level basketball player. It's some body type. I think our sport has evolved where the blokes really well, like Stevie, Pete, and stuff. Back in the day, I mean, if you probably just look at, he had enough boxes checked to become one of the greatest. He was just mentally strong. He was good on the bike. His skills were, he put enough hours in. He probably didn't mind riding in the mud and the slog and was just tough mentally, and learned enough about bike setup and just checked a lot of boxes. And that was enough at the moment to win races. You didn't need to, you could still party if you had to and eat pie, and it was enough. But
Yeah.
we've seen it evolve to where, what do you call it? Survival of the fittest. Look what's happening to our sport this year with the cost of racing and the cost of, we're pushing out the weak and the strong are just getting, and now look at the top of our, I was talking about moto guys, Chase Sexton and Jet. Look at the mountain bike world. I mean, let's arguably say, like, right now, it's, like, Bernie's the best mountain biker in the world currently and been for a while. Look at his build. He's he's Jet Lawrence. He's Chase Sexton. He's got an ass. He's got a big set of legs. He stands up. He's got good posture. His alignment, his position on the bike is so sick. He's using all the advantages of his body on that bike. All these kids are on the side of the track saying, oh my gosh, that specialized bike is so incredible. I'm not saying it isn't. I just remind them those riders are pretty incredible. Finn and him, look at Finn's build. Look at
Yeah.
it might, hopefully it doesn't sound weird, but look at the neck on all these boys. And I'm not saying they're doing neck exercises, but there's a certain body type that starts being built. They got some, they got some posture, they got some neck. And you look at the moto guys, same thing. Look at Jet, look at Chase, look at Finn,
Yeah.
look at Loic. There's a body type that's being other coming from genetics, not somebody building it, not some coach, not some trainer. It's just that is being, it's making it to the top. And add in some extra ingredients like a great bike and a great nutrition. And I remember when Loic used to be in New Zealand with us because he was, Blinky was on the team.
Yeah.
And and this is sort of a side thing, but I remember when Loic and Loris were on the team and we went, I'll even back up, we were in Andorra. And from my background on the basic check marks of, psychology,
Yeah.
the basic check marks, I'm watching these boys and we're in Andorra going for pizza. And I could just see the way these guys were interacting at a very young age. Like, I remember Loris, he was like 15 and Loic was like maybe 16 or 17. And there was a really, hot waitress. They probably don't remember this. They'll giggle if they hear this. And I remember the way the boys would interact, even with this waitress, and the way the other boys at the table, I won't name any names, but there was other guys that weren't as successful. And the way these boys would interact, it was with real confidence. It was like a sense of eye contact, communication. It was very humble and honest. And they weren't bragging about how they, I think Loic might have just won the junior. He was very engaged in the conversation. He
Yeah.
was very present. very present, very there, being involved with everybody. And I was just like, these guys check some real good psychological boxes.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be pretty great.
Yeah.
Well, here we are later, world champions.
Yeah.
And, Loris Vergier also got a pretty good build. But I was saying Loic, where we went to New Zealand and watch him, I think, Sam Blinky would say, oh, he doesn't eat very well and everything else. I think Loic has just evolved himself to become this incredible. He had that really good start, that psychology. I won't go too many into stories, but I've heard stories about him and his family and his parents. And they're pretty amazing people and humble people. And I know that about Loris's dad as well. And they raised with this really character, this really confidence, and more secure. I hate to use the word we're all insecure, but we are by a certain level, whether we're trying to, concern ourselves with our bald heads when we're young. Nowadays I wear it just because I want to remind I'm Fox, cool, thanks for supporting me,
Yeah.
and the sun. I was talking to a friend and I said, I remember evolving as a kid where I used to be more concerned by that. I got a bald head and
Yeah.
it's incredible psychology, right? And I look at these athletes young and the ones that are really, you could say confident, they're just lack doubt in themselves, really young age. And I could see this. So your question, like about like a Jackson Goldstone, and again, I've spent time with Loic. I spent time at with Goldstone around Squamish a bit because he used to live close to me. Watched him and his dad kind of hustle and build himself a bit of a mountain bike thing, a career at a young age. And you know, I, I tell a funny story about Jackson one time I saw him downtown doing a manual on a mountain bike, and he probably is going to laugh at this and not remember it. But, he kind of like was manualing on his mountain bike, very young age, helmet up on top of his head. And he was manualing, and there was like a back to a girl. There was a good looking girl there and walking on the side of the road, probably 10 years older than him. And I remember I was like walking to go get groceries and he did like a look back at her and he was like, and he gave her one of these like, mm-hmm. And I thought, you little shit, like all of us going through the teenage career. And he had all the confidence, like he was like, yeah, that chick digs me, and I thought, somebody could mistake that for
Cocky.
cockiness
Yeah.
or arrogance or something. But it's like, no, he just, and certain people, like, man, if you have that ingredient, if you have that, and number two, Jackson, man, I remember a few years ago, it's winter, it's snowing, it's shitty outside. And I remember like how many people were out riding. Kids in our town, like we have a lot of good kids coming out of that community. The Jewetts, the Cruz family was up the road, and there was, I mean, the Sherlocks were there and Seth. But I remember we went out for a ride, us old dogs. And, sure enough, Jackson's up there in the snow pushing his bike
Yeah.
and doing a little film edit, but also riding and loving it, like laughing. His hands are freezing. And I was thinking, you know, he's strong, I think mentally. I think he's really believes in himself and he really loves his bike. Like he just loves his bike. And I always said, like a few years later, I saw him at the races. You come to the World Cups, you'd see him at the finish line, and what do you see him? You'd see him screaming and yelling and jumping up for his competitors and
Yeah.
like applauding anybody and so pumped for
Yeah.
his fellow allies. Like, and I was like, that's very real. Like it's not disgenuine, it's not some sponsorship bullshit or for social media. To me, he was like, he was in love with the sport, he was in love with the determination and the efforts that these athletes made. And to me, that's like way more powerful than a squat, than
Yeah.
a wattage on a bike, than what you can do in the gym. I don't give a shit how much you can do in the gym. If you don't have those ingredients, I don't care what bike you have. I don't care what coach you have. I don't care what team you're on. We've been it. We know we've had guys on our team that have got all the skill.
Yeah.
They've got the fitness, and you just can't get them to perform the way they should be able to. They just come up short, and they just, and I'm one of those guys like Nige, you and I have talked about this. There's so many athletes. I had this really good chat with, Nico Mullally a few years ago. And I was like, Nico would be like, dude, he was on our team and I wasn't training him, but he asked me for advice once in a while, or I just tell him anyways. And he said, dude, I just got to get confidence. And I was like, Nico, I just got to tell you, dude, I've heard you say it so much. I have to say, I don't agree. I don't agree with any of you guys that say you don't have confidence. In fact, I think you have more than enough confidence to win these events, this World Cup. You have enough, you're exploding with confidence. I believe it's the opposite. You have too much doubt, and that's your mistake. You need to learn how to remove that doubt. The confidence is there. And the worst part is you're walking around constantly saying you don't have confidence. Well, that's just a way of removing confidence because you're just telling yourself that it's there. Check some boxes that is going to convince you to have less doubt about your abilities and your push. And I mean, to me, for example, Nico is one of the most impressive people I've ever worked with. Talk about work ethic, being genuine, being just like people buy into Nico. He's just one of those people. And because he's him and he's kind in his own ways and it comes across to everybody as very genuine. I don't think he's I don't think he's will be disappointed if I say this, but he probably didn't have all the talent, like bike talent. You see him,
Yeah.
like he didn't have that.
Yeah.
He's quite athletic looking, but like he went pretty far in the sport and look what he's done with this sport since. Like look at the team he's built out of nothing. And to me, that's like proof that the mindset, the attitude, and is so when you look at like, do we need to be the start of your question? Do we need to look like Amory? Amory looks like if we're going to use the word beast,
Yeah.
that's like beast.
Yeah.
Big, broad shoulders, strong looking body, eyes of fire. Dude, that guy. And he went to like Retallick with me and I hung out with him. He was there for a few days. And he was there when Rob Scott was there and we were all hanging and we were riding. I just watched the way he approached everything. And I was like, this guy loves this game and he has a certain type of build. But like, he chose a good path. Like he's with the right people, in my opinion. He's with the French people. They have such a family over there, the Ruffins at Common Cell. They understood the value of creating a great, strong group of people. Like they just trust each other. They
Yeah.
trust, and they have such a family unit. And if somebody is having some emotional connection, mom's there and dad's there, and they feel that familyness, and there's no bullshit. There's no drama on the team. There's no one bickering mechanic over another bickering mechanic about travel and flights.
Yeah.
That's where I think that's how I got this job, Nigel, as a team manager, owner, whatever you call it, is I brought the psychology from the sport. And I thought, dude, guys like freaking Martin Whiteley, they're incredible. Dude, I can't do 1/10 of the job that guy can do as a team. Man, like
Yeah.
Laurent Delorme, those guys, the way they pull that shit off, they're so good at that skill set. And like Will, I was talking to Will when I was there, and about the Madison thing and closing down stuff. I told Will, I said, dude, I always looked up to you, dude. You're like this calmness, this real, very humble kind of dude and didn't need to be in the spotlight. And I always thought it was really cool. But some of these guys, but I think I've always brought the psychology and I don't know about you, but like I've been just as guilty of it, right? Being weakening me, like Norco days, dude, like first year, ignorance is bliss. I had no friggin' idea what to do with this pile of money and like not take all of it for myself and put it into the team. And then how can I get Blinky? Because he's important. If he's succeeding, the team is succeeding. And how do we do this and that? And you just like flying by the seat of your pants. But then I remember 2 and 3, we sucked as a
Yeah.
team.
Yeah.
And I take full responsibility. I now look at now, um, best thing ever happened to me. We were walking in the forest. I remember on like year 2 or 3, and I was like, oh God, I don't know if I'm good at this job anymore. I've walked with my wife and the dog, and and it's like, we're we suck. We're third year race team. Blinky's worse than he's ever been as a racer. Fucking sponsors are not going to continue with us. And my wife was just like, "Are you done whining?" And I was like, "Holy shit!" I'm like, "What did you just say?" And I'm like, "She's like, you were just whining about things. You got to like stand up, man. Like
Yeah.
let's figure your shit out." And I was like, holy man. And then a friend of mine, gave me this book called The Speed of Trust. And I started reading this book, and I was like, man, I broke every single rule in this book, running around the pits, kissing ass,
Mhm.
trying to be everybody's friend,
Yeah.
um, trying to be somebody that I thought would be more successful, more with the program, telling athletes, riders, mechanics things they wanted to hear when they would say, "Oh, that tire sucks. Oh, we'll get it figured out. We'll go to this new tire." Instead of saying, "Listen, guys, this is what we signed up for.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to use. If you don't like it, we'll ride this contract out. You go your separate ways. I'll go mine. No hard feelings." And just being more like, I guess you could say, removing my own self-doubt
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like being more confident in myself. And I think I realized, and it was like, I'm just like the athlete. I've got to steer this ship, and I've got to, and somehow I kind of somewhat pulled some of my shit together. And in that fourth year with Norco, we had our best ever. We were top 10 team. Blinky was king of Crankworks. We put him back inside the top 10. We had a couple World Cup podiums. We had just, and I'm not gonna, not that I'm saying it's secrets, but I had a strategy that year before. There's a reason that my wife and I are named in the credits in the movie Gamble.
Mhm.
I'll say that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
We knew Blinky needed to be a rock star again in that movie.
Yeah.
And I had a good friend of mine, a race technician slash consultant, who came to our program, and he said, "You guys are a dysfunctional team, man." And I'm watching Fraser McGlone put his feet up on the table, talk to the mechanics. You're not there managing that. You're not there saying, "Hey, what does the mechanic need to do, Fraser, to make your bike better, to make you," you're just letting all these vague conversations happen. And I'm supposed to be the leader. So I took all responsibility of it, and I took this advice. And that fall in our third year, man, dude, I never been, I guess you could say, so busy. Like, I had to look at everything. Where does Sam race? What events? Would he be successful? Can I let you in on a little secret?
Mhm.
We had to beat Sam Hill.
Right.
And at the Continental race,
In
uh, what was that race? Remember 2000 and like 16, 17? There was that winter race, and what would have been summer down there.
yeah.
And Sam went, I sent him over there, and Sam Blinky
Yeah.
beat Sam Hill.
Okay. In a downhill race.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we had that race, and then I was like, I figured Sam was back on his heels a little bit, wasn't quite prepared, and we really prepared Sam. Blinky needed some, like, removed doubt. He needed to believe in himself.
Yeah.
And I was like, we gotta, he's kind of like the horse in front of the cart. He's got to pull this team along. He's got to be the guy. He's the rock star.
Yeah,
He's
because
making the big.
yeah, when that main rider isn't, I've been through that myself with our team, and when your main rider is doing well and performing well, and like going back to the confidence thing that you were mentioning with some of the athletes, um, I've never come across anyone with as much self-belief as Sam Hill when he's at the top of his game.
Heck
Um,
yeah.
when everything's going well and he's into it and he's riding, well, and that he likes the bike and everything's, he doesn't demand a lot of things like some riders. He's quite, simple. You don't, we didn't have a big, huge team with tons of staff members and, you know, but when Sam's confident, I just see this calmness, and he's nervous, but he's doesn't seem nervous to anybody else, and you just know
Yep.
that he's capable of winning and he's going to win, and he has no doubt, no matter who's there, that he can win. And I've not seen
Yep.
that in too many of the athletes I've had on the program. But
Yep.
when he's not in that, state of mind, and he's maybe, not happy and into what he's doing, like you mentioned with Jackson Goldstone, I think, uh, if you're super stoked and you just want to be there more than anything else, and you've got that buzz as well as being a good bike rider, you're halfway there to winning. Um, but
There it
yeah,
is. It's like you said it. It's a lot of ingredients.
yeah,
And it's the love, it's the passion, and what you just talked about there, in my belief, is you it was simpler. Everything when it was done, there's less thinking. It goes back to this. It's I think once you're in your thinking mind, once you're going there because you're insecure, you have doubt, then you're trying to think through this, and you can't be thinking through this. I mean, on the off season, yes. The week prior, yes, you think about the process and you check the boxes. But the closer and closer, when you, like you said, when you've seen him at the races, he's just in autopilot. It stops thinking. It's just like we say, it becomes proactive instead of reactive. And you're not thinking, and you're just doing your thing, and you get on your bike, and it's just like autopilot. And you were a part of that environment. You probably, well, you know, I think you get it. That was your job as well. Like, you had to make sure that the food was there at time and the travel was good and the boys were remaining humble, and at the same time they were special. I know when that time when I saw those Super Bruni signs going up on the race circuit. And I know who pulled let's Laurent,
yeah, yeah,
you know, let's put those signs up and have Loic understand you're not normal anymore, dude. You're Super Bernie. And there was a time and a place for that. And Loic went, okay, I'm pretty special now. I'm capable of, and it took a long time. That doesn't just come overnight. And back to Jackson. Jackson works. You might look on the out. Don't try and read a book by its cover. If you see somebody small and thin and you think, I've got an athlete right now, Gavin Tomlinson, he got second in qualifying at Mount St. Anne. He's a top 5, top 10 junior right now, with specialized in the Monster Army group. Incredible boy. It's my second year with him. His weight to horsepower, he beat Richie last year in the fitness tests and the challenges. So you'd see him. You know, Sometimes he's a bit thin, and, he might not look as powerful as Richie, but his weight to horsepower is incredible. In tests and we do these, very mechanical type challenges, like, lifting weights and doing wattage outputs, and on the bike and on the rower, on the ski erg, and various mobility tests, etc. But also in the real world, if we went outside and we just had to race our bike up a hill, or run up and down, or push wheelbarrows or whatever, he's just insanely capable. So, I know Jackson does some work. He puts some time. Maybe it isn't visible, and maybe it isn't at the same time his highest priority. But I would say that he makes other things that are equally or more important higher priority, like you say, his on bike time, his passion, um, his surrounding himself with good people. Like, look at the amount of people around him that are just helping him go in the right direction. I know his parents are quite incredible. people, and they're the whole thing, the whole package. His sister, they're all racers, and his dad. Geez, you go to an event, all his dad wants to do is Ron just wants to ride his bike all day, all night. I go riding with him often. It's like that's a proof of that family, and everything. Mom's a teacher, I believe, and it's just I see it. It's a lot of ingredients. I mean, it's like people. I used to hear people say about Sam Hill. They used to say, "Oh, Sam's not a big worker," and I know for a fact Sam could. I don't know where he's at now, but at one time Sam was an incredible pedaler. I went for a ride with him one time, and he blew my mind how strong he was pedaling up a mountain. Now that's just fitness to pedal up a mountain. I'm always careful, Nigel, because there's so many of these kids or riders or athletes, because they go out for a ride with a bunch on a trail bike and it's more obvious, they go all start climbing. We've been there with the group, with the pack, and we're riding our pack. And there's somebody who can blast up the hill faster than the next guy. We'll all sit back and say, well, that guy's really fit. Well, I'm careful with that. He's definitely more fit at climbing than us, but I also can have those athletes where when they go descend, their arms blow up in 30 seconds. So they're not really that fit. At least their arms aren't fit to perform, or they may not support their back. Their back sort of, and they lose body position. So to me, again, got to watch what we consider fitness. It's not a one thing. It's not who can push more in a squat or who can do more watts on the bike or who can do more bench press. Fitness can be a lot of variables. It could be, how, how much can your body handle repetitively? Because I look at how many athletes are just capable of, you know, let's say even going home after a weekend of racing and they're back on their bike within 2 days and they don't need 4 days to recover. Well, to me, that athlete's gaining advantages because they're on their bike and they're learning new skills or whatever they learned on the weekend that they have to work on. So, it's not a one size fits all with all the athletes. No way. Everyone's individual. Don't try and um, turn them all into the same type of athlete because it's not possible. I think generally they got to get those things we talked about earlier, those three boxes they need to check, become more durable, injury preventative. They have to develop their riding position and posture and get their place on the bike better. And you can do that through the training to influence that. And third, you have to get the physicality better. And the physicality can come from increasing their strength to increase power, or you can increase their cardiovascular system to increase power. And you can advance also their energy system. That's a whole other conversation. I don't see it enough. I learned that in motocross. So the energy system is not so much a muscle, it's a system in your body. And people remember going to school, you learn something about something called the Krebs cycle. And the Krebs cycle is the energy system. So some of the stuff I've done, let's say tricks that I've done with Richie when we were out winning enduro championships, EWS, we apply that. We do a type of training that improves Richie's ability, his energy system, his conditioning system. So there's a style of training we do for that. We also maintain that during the on season so he can perform that way. And that's, not that I'm trying to hide or these secrets, because there's a CrossFit sort of a version of where you can work on your strength and conditioning because you're running around in a circuit and you're doing this stuff. Johnny shows some pretty good stuff at Fit for Racing. Johnny's got Johnny's got some cool stuff. He puts out cool stuff about different ways to do movements and stuff. And there's a lot of guys I look up to out there that are other trainers. D Tidwell's incredible. We always have chats and stuff. Yeah, like again, I don't try and let my ego get in the way and be concerned about what the next guy's doing constantly. I think we're learning with our athletes. We know that this is a huge mental component. I would say the training, the fitness, the physical stuff that happens. everyone is different. I would say some athletes, it's 80% physical and 20% mental that they need to do it.
Yeah.
I would say for others, it's the opposite. I have athletes that they need the training just 20% for their physicality and 80% for their mental. They need to invest. They need to often, dude, I even recommended athletes even just I used to have athletes in our race team and I used to say, well, what do you think next? Should I do more training? Should I do more on bike coaching? And I'd say, go get a job.
Yeah.
Put more on skin in the game. You're taking this for granted. You're you know, a little bit entitled. You think this is just the way it is. It's like you need to figure out that this is like I'm so glad. I don't know about you, but I'm glad the way I kind of came up as a team owner manager. Dude, the first year I did it, I slept on couches and
Yeah.
maxed out my credit cards.
Yeah.
I was fucking broke
Yeah.
doing that first year. I was spending money on the race team, and I was like, I remember having to try and figure out how we can rent the cheapest possible rental car and fit as many of us as possible in a car and go to Europe. And then I think that made me better when we did have a budget and Norco, and you could, I mean, we still had some, we had a little more space for a little bit of fun. We go
Yeah.
rent some go-karts or have a nice restaurant meal.
Yeah.
But I don't take it for granted. It's like,
Yeah.
this is, and I think this is the psychology, dude. Like my other part to this answer would be, what if Jackson Goldstone, I don't know what he's doing, what level of effort. He could be like Steve Peat. He could be a little bit sneaky and not tell you what he does in the background, right? He could have a little bit of strategy and be fooling a lot of us. But what if we are assuming correct that he doesn't do as much physical and he's proof to some people that you don't need to, and he doesn't have a maybe he doesn't have a sports psych, maybe no nutritionist, maybe he just rides his bike.
Yeah.
So let's pretend that that is true. What happens if he does add those ingredients? Is he dominating right now by a mile? Maybe he's even better than he is now, and he did have an injured year. Would he have sustained? Would he have not been injured? Would nutrition help that? Maybe he would have had more energy, wouldn't have fall. Would have a psychologist help with that? Maybe he would have made a different decision. Would have being stronger and gone gym work help that? Maybe. So there's all these things I can't say for sure. And I am only like anybody else. We're learning as we go along, but I'd be a liar if I didn't admit that probably could even be better yet. And I think a lot of athletes could.
Yeah. I'm sure he will. And so, Todd, out of all the different incredible athletes that you've worked with, and helped along the way, who would you say is, who's the most determined and the most, the person that you've thought, wow, this guy is super motivated, super driven, like who's the most driven and he's going to do anything he can to improve in what he's doing, if there is one person.
It's so wild, eh? This is sort of the question that like Red Bull, we did those race tapes, and Lettuce there, he was asking me this question too. It was like, Aaron, the hardest working guy you ever worked with? We hear that Aaron was like gnarly and this and that. And I was like, to be honest with you, it's really hard to say that there was one person I work with that was more a harder worker, more determined. They all have this thing that's different. I'm going to say that I would rather I'd rather tell everybody, a panel, say, here's the kind of story about each one of these people. Which one do you think was at the best of building their craft? And I don't even know if they would be able to answer it in front of a complete group of psychologists and coaches, because they'd say, well, see, each one of those found their sweet spot and knew how to do it right. Stevie, I'm going to go back. Stevie sat at my house on year 5, the year before he won the championship. True story. Some people heard the story, and they'll have to hear it again. He was at my house. We were having breakfast in the morning, and I'm making waffles. Really, you know, badass, healthy waffles. And it's a Sunday morning, and he's staying at my house. He gets up in the morning, he comes down, I can make him a coffee. And I was like, dude, we got waffles today. He said, awesome. He said, what's in those waffles? This is a guy that when he started with year one with me, he was like, I just want to drink beer once in a while, have some nachos. And then year two, he's like into oatmeal and he's cooking. And by year five, he's gnarly. He's like so into nutrition. I'm not even pushing him. He's asking me more questions, and I want to be back to the pancakes. He says, or waffles. He says, okay, Todd, he's having his coffee beside me. I get that we're eating these waffles. I think I asked him why. And he says, we're having spelt powder. Our flour is our main ingredient. So that's our carbohydrate. And our carbohydrate is our energy. I said, correct. He says, and we're using chia seeds because they're good for building our digestion immune system. I said, correct. And then he said, and we're using good oils in this. You're using a flaxseed oil that you can cook with. Like, dude, he knew all the parts.
Yeah.
And we used what? We used farm fresh eggs in the ingredients and so on. I said, yeah. And he's like, okay, well, I need all these things in my diet. And we're making a little bit of eggs for protein. I said, yep. He says, why are we having the butter you suggested here and the syrup? And I said, I don't know, it just tastes good. We put some butter on there. It's good butter. It's organic butter. It's from down the road. He's like, but don't we have enough fat in here already? We have fat from the oil. So yeah. And we're gonna have some pecans on top. That's a little more fat too, and a little bit more protein. I said, yep. So we really don't need the butter. And I said, no, I guess not. It's just for flavor. Dude, it's Sunday. Chill. We're going to go ride moto.
Yeah.
How about the maple syrup? Isn't that just sugar? And I was like, yeah, but it's one of my athletes sent it from Quebec. It's really, really good. I'm like, dude, I'm not testing him. I was going to have it. I was like, fuck, I want to have these pancakes, dude. And he's like, I don't want any butter or syrup. And it was very honest. It was very genuine. It wasn't like he was showing off to me that he didn't need this shit. He was like, no, I'm good without it. And I was like,
Wow.
why is that? Why is that? And he's like, I need no psychological barriers to say that I'm not all in. He says, I do everything I'm doing right now because I want, you said it before, I want to be fucking champion. He said that to me in his eyes, and I'll never forget it to this day. May a lightning bolt strike my mother down.
Yeah.
He sat beside Kathy and I, my wife and I. My wife was across making some things like the eggs or something. And I remember her looking over at me going, like, holy shit. It wasn't that later we talked about it. It wasn't that some people are going to see that and say, that's kind of silly. Like, is the butter really going to make him worse that day? No. Is the sugar from the maple syrup really going to? It's not that. He didn't give a shit about that. We were going to go ride moto for 2 hours. It was right here. It was his head. He was saying to me, this is where I'm at now. I want this so bad. I want this so fucking bad that everything I'm going to do. So he was not he was the evolution of train smarter, not harder. So he was like, well, what's the right amount I need to ride? And I don't need to do more because you say more will make me more of an aerobic athlete and then I'll lose strength or power. So you knew, and you don't want me to get too strong because I lose stamina. And so he was willing to really know that there were certain places you push. But then you look at a guy like, I'd go into somebody like Sam Blenkinsop. Dude, that guy, it's hard to say who could outwork him. Like, he was nuts, dude. He would be, I remember when I was working with also with Marcelo Gutierrez.
What?
And Marcelo came over and he came to New Zealand with us and stayed with us. And we had all the athletes, PerformX out, Casey Brown and Miranda, I think, was over there, and Miller and everywhere. Anyways, I remember Marcelo staying at Blinky's house, and he got up, have some coffee at 8 in the morning, and Sam comes in the backyard and he's painting, he's got coffee, and he's painting the fence, having coffee. And I think he might have been walking the dog in the yard, like painting the fence, drinking coffee, and walking the dog. And Marcelo's like, dude, I'm just waking up.
Yeah.
You're already painting the fence. He's like, yeah, I went surfing this morning as well.
No
He's
way.
like, you were out surfing. He's like, yeah, I went surfing. It's 7 in the morning or 6 in the morning. Sam already had ate breakfast, was painting his fence. True story. I think he was building his fence, walking the dog. He had like he would get more done. And I remember also that was a big influence on Stevie. Stevie said that was a lot how Bear Claw was. Bear Claw had a big influence on him. I remember he was like, Bear Claw would come over and tell Stevie, dude, you can get a lot of shit done before 8 a.m. So, and it was like, so I always looked at like, holy Sam Blenkinsop, dude, that guy, I could tell him to train from morning till night, and he probably wouldn't even question it. He would just go, okay. He'd probably tell him to go to the gym for 3 hours. He'd do 3 hours. You'd tell him, dude, that guy is relentless in the ability to put in the time and work and do it, like, and do it. You didn't have to motivate him, nothing. And you look at like the evolution for me to go to somebody like Aaron Gwin. Aaron Gwin was very methodical.
Right.
Aaron Gwin had a process and he didn't disrupt the force. His process, he very analytical. He had his kept it simple. He didn't complicate, he didn't overthink shit. He was like, this is the way we're going to do it. He came to me for advice on training. He had worked with Tomac. I
Mhm.
remember, I never forget the day he found me and dude, I was hanging out with you. And I remember we were doing something. I think we went for a ride and I was in the parking lot and somebody said, Gwyn's looking for you. And I'd known Aaron a little bit from motocross talk and supercross. I'd see him at the races and I'd see him at the track and say hi to him. And then he just came and sat with me in the parking lot at Fort William. And um, he said, I want to I want to be better. And I've seen the way you work with Stevie. And I wonder if that's okay, if you're okay to help me out too.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's chat. But Stevie, an example would be this. I mean, Aaron, recently he told one of our riders on the team, Seth Sherlock, and you know Seth, you love him. Seth is so willing to do the work. I worked with me for 4 years now. And we were at Val di Sole, and it's an example of Aaron's process. He said to Seth, well, you really want to step up at this race, eh? Like you believe Val di Sole can be your kind of place. It's steep, it's gnarly. Like that's awesome. So what are you doing about it? Like, I know you're trained. I know you're prepared. Todd said you're the best you've ever been. Seth became the best weight to horsepower athlete I trained this spring. Beat Richie again.
Wow.
Richie's always sort of the benchmark. He was next level. He was rock climbing. He was doing everything. And here's Aaron at the race. And he's like, so what are you doing to be better this weekend? Well, I don't know. He's like, well, you got to do more, dude. And he's like, to be honest with you, you just want to do good. I'm going to be honest with you. When I was your age and came into the sport, I didn't want to just do good. He's like, I wanted to dominate. Like, and he sold it. Like it was honest. He's like, I didn't was like, oh, I'm trying to qualify. I'm trying to do good. I want to do. Aaron was like, I'm sorry, but he's like, it almost sounds, a bit harsh, but he's like, I wanted to smoke fools.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to beat people. And he starts saying to Seth, well, what are you going to do about practice? So I'll be really ready. And he's like, well, have you communicated with the mechanics yet? Have you decided what you're doing with your bike setup? Have you asked Todd if he'll drive you to the top of the mountain and you can be the first guy in the lineup instead of waiting in the lineup down at the bottom? So Seth's like, well, that legal? And he's like, for sure it's legal. All you got to do is be at the top, start. You can be there however you want. If you want to get up there, you can be ahead of the group. You can get an extra run in. And by having an extra run, you're going to be that much further ahead. So you see this, he had this it wasn't just work harder, it was work smarter and it was strategic. So which one of these guys, and I didn't even name Richie, I watched Richie evolve. Richie evolved from a powerhouse kid. You know what I had to do? I'll tell you what. Richie used to be messy as hell.
Right.
And Miss Richie's bed was messy. He would sit on his phone and he would flap about, is that what the kids say? And I used to say to him, dude, he's coming over. I'm like, you just gotta kind of get your shit together, dude. You gotta start planning, become more organized. What do they say? Tidy bed is a tidy head.
Yeah. Yeah.
This military thing, and it's always worked with me. I mean, I've pulled off a lot of shit that I shouldn't have just because I've been organized and planned and how my office is set up right now. I know where everything is. I'm not smart enough to figure out how to do this if I'm in chaos.
Yeah.
And with Rich, I just watched Richie over these last, 13 years with Richie this year. And watching Richie, like he's pretty like he runs Richie Root Incorporated really well. He's on point.
Yeah.
He's got all these little ingredients. He's really into nutrition. He's training. His bikes are like his bikes aren't ragged anymore. He takes care of them. His rooms are tidy. He knows where his shit is. And it's created a different mindset. Like Richie is always been calm, but it's a different thing now. Like Richie mentally has gotten to a point of being very sharp. He's very focused. He's very present, ultra present. So, and Richie loves the work and these guys. So when I was asked this question before too, it's like all of them, like I don't think you get to the top without having some really incredible traits,
Yeah. I
you know.
agree. Yeah.
And Nigel, what I always focus on with athletes or with the team, and it's hopefully it doesn't, with some people it's a little bit overwhelming, but I tell them that, you know, um, behavior, well, there's two types of psychology that to me are very basic. There's attitude and there's behavior. And to me, attitude you can adjust on the fly. This is the way and there'll probably be psychologists that would sort of disagree or say this is too simple or I'm not explaining it properly, but I believe that attitude is something you can adjust at any moment. You can look at the weather and go, oh, it sucks. It's cold. It's wet. Or I look at it and say, well, it's a good day to do work inside. It's a good day for nature. It's a good day for the trails, the trail building. What do they say? See the glass half full instead of empty.
Yeah.
So you stub your toe once in a while and you say, oh, shit, and you get mad, but then you can go, well, wait a second. That taught me something. Pay attention where you are instead of kicking something you just weren't present. Or maybe you should move that thing that you kicked your toe with,
Yeah.
So, your attitude you have control of, I believe, at every moment, and you can work on it, at all times. And what you're judging about somebody. I caught myself a couple of days ago thinking I saw somebody not doing something, and I was like, dude, why are you concerned by this? Why are you judging this person right now? Focus on yourself. You got stuff to work on.
Yeah.
But
It's human nature.
attitude, that's attitude. But I believe behavior is deep. And behavior is from mom and dad. If you look at all of us, we're just a byproduct of
Yeah.
how we were raised and our environment. It could be our parents, it could be our friends when we grew up, it could be our uncles and aunts. And we look at where that,
Mhm.
and to me, though, that one's a hard one to, let's say, move the needle. But to me, you can with attitude. If you are correcting your attitude moment by moment, day by day, hour by hour, whatever, to me, you have the ability to recorrect a little bit about behavior that is more deeper seated. And to me, that is huge. Like I have this not famous, but I have this thing I say with my athletes, and that is just be yourself unless you suck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure, you'd like to say, I just want to be myself. I just want to be myself. Well, yeah, be yourself, but not if it's damaging yourself, not if it's hurting others around you. Like you might need to sort of find a way to adjust it somewhat and
Yeah.
still be individual. We all don't need to be and act and walk like Lloyd Bruni or Jackson Goldstone or anybody. And I think when you help people, when you hopefully can help them find themselves a little bit better and be more, that's, it's human, like you say, human nature. We're all, I'm just as guilty of it. So,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, that's, I mean, super interesting stuff, Todd. I could go on. We'll probably have to do another podcast about just talking about running teams, I think. But I think the working with the athlete stuff has been super exciting. But just to go off on a completely another tangent, just to skim over it, can you just give us a little bit about your childhood and your BMX background? We're a similar age, and we grew up in a great era for bikes as kids. Just give us a little bit of insight on how that was for you, where you rode and what bikes you rode.
well, we were bunny hopping dinosaurs back then, right? So, um, us old Fs, but yeah, BMX, exactly. I grew up, in Canada. You just think of hockey players, and I don't know, like a lot of us, I guess we just didn't feel like we wanted to be as much a part of a team, and we were more into individual sports.
Yeah.
And I think I grew up feeling that way. My influence came real quickly in this physical thing. Before BMX, I'll never forget it. I walked into the gym. True story. I never was a gym guy. I was not. I grew up with, dead Kennedys and punk rock as a kid. I was anti-gym, anti-fitness. I was a kid that had skateboard, and then all of a sudden I was like, nah, I don't want to be on a team with a bunch of jocks. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
We went to California, I think, as a kid, and I remember we went down there because my dad would get us down there through some prizes he'd win, and we could go down to, like you, go down to Disneyland and go down to Anaheim. And I saw kids with like, skateboards, and I saw like surfboards and I was like, wow, people are, you know, not all of us are the same. These people don't care about hockey or, this is pretty cool. And so I was like, okay, I want to do something individual. And I tried a little bit of skateboarding, and I was just like, whoa, dude, this is so hard. This is like, and I didn't have the determination to do it. And I remember I tried it, went to a skate park, and my aunt took me, and I went. And then all of a sudden, my my cousin, who actually ended up being an NHL hockey player, he
Right.
had a BMX Action magazine sitting on the counter, and I was like, what the hell's this? And I started looking at BMX, and I was like, this is pretty cool. And it was like Pooch BMX bikes. Tinker Juarez was the big guy. And I was like looking at shit, and I'm like, this is pretty sweet. And then we bought some bikes and started going racing. And then like you whatever, you got a bike and you got a Kuahara and you got some cool shit. And you're in, but you're not fully in. But I remember we were kind of racing. My brother got kind of good. My brother got factory Kuahara in Canada.
Wow.
And I was like, this is where my mom thinks I got my pedigree. I had to manage him. So I actually had to, I was 5 years older. And so my brother's too young to manage himself. There's no internet, there's no cell phones. So my parents would say, you go to races, and I would kind of go with him and I'd take care of him and chaperone him. I was okay. I raced expert, but I never got that good. I was middle of the road guy towards middle to mid back, but my brother was really good, top three. So I was kind of managing him. So I was like taking care of his bike. I remember going to a national and just like I was racing to the finish line only because I remember I wanted to get back. I get my bike, my brother set up. So
Oh,
I
wow.
always remember that. I was never forget that. I was like racing. I'm going to the finish line. I'm like, I got to get back. My brother's in a gate. He's in two gates from now.
Wow.
And I remember going to the finish line and not caring that I got like sixth or seventh. I didn't care. Like it didn't matter. I wasn't like, and I remember going to my brother, and his bike was kind of dirty, and I was cleaning it. And I was like, dude, you can't have your bike like this. And I remember him like, I was like, come on, have something to eat. You got to get something in you. And he'd have a banana or something. And he went and raced. But I remember he came across the line, and I remember he got like second at a national. And I remember he threw his bike, and he got really mad, and he was like, oh, and he was gritting his teeth. And I was like, holy shit, if I just got second, I'd have been so stoked. But I was like, that's the difference.
Yeah.
He wants to win more. He wants it more than me.
Yeah.
And so we went BMX racing from there. And then, of course, when older brother me, I found chicks and I found cars, and I was like, nah, I'm not that good. As soon as I bailed out of it at 16, 17, he was done. And because his older brother wasn't there as an influence, and we had half pipe ramps. Like we had two quarter pipes in our backyard. And that influence came another real good BMX story. You'll love this. Um, we went to a BMX race indoor in Canada, and the BMX action team was there. R.L. Osborne and Mike Buff. And
Wow.
dude, I remember sitting on the side of the thing, and I'm like, it was like at a car show, and the BMX race was next to it. And I remember the lights went out inside the building, and Motley Crue Shout at the Devil started playing, in the beginning, all my. So I'm like, what the hell is this music? And this like, and all of a sudden that dun dun dun, and the lights went on, and this guy comes blasting out, Mike Buff, and
Yeah.
he boosts off this quarter pipe like 6 feet out, and that was it. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I remember R.L. Osborne doing a tailspin
Yeah.
off of like a cheese wedge.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then jumped the car,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah.
So I went and I started doing BMX freestyle, and I still have the scar. I went and did a CFL football game, which is like an NFL football game, like 20, 30,000 people, and I had to jump 3 cars. And I
Wow.
remember I ate shit. When I first got on the track, they were introducing me, and I could wheelie. So I
Yeah.
did this big wheelie, and I was manualing, and I looked over, and I went up, I looped out and I'm on my back, and dude, 20, 30,000 people booing me.
Oh
And
no.
then I went out and I jumped these hoods of these 3 cars.
Yeah.
And then it was like, yeah, I did that and it was good. And then went to university, all that, boring shit, like I told you earlier. I went to school, went back to Canada. Like I went down to school in the States. I always had this like you, I think we had this like attraction to California,
Yeah.
the Vans skateboard shoes. Like I remember went down there and I got a set of those checkerboard shoes, and they said, I love girls on the sole. I got them put on there and stuff. It was just, such cheese balls. And the BMX thing was kind of like skateboarding thing. It was kind of a little bit rebellious, a little bit of punk rock.
Yeah.
And but you were still a bike rider, and you still, and anyways, I was doing it. And I always remember I went to the gym in the high school, and it stuck with me. And I went in there, and it was like somebody said, you could be faster on a BMX bike if you got stronger. And I was like, really? And I walked in the gym, and there's all these jocks, these football guys and stuff. And I remember there was a ski racer. I'll never forget it, Jason Lucky. And he was there, and he said to me, if you can't squat your body weight 10 times, you're not an athlete. Never forget that. And I remember putting my body weight on a squat bar, and I couldn't even do it once. And I was like, oh, it was all buckled up, and I got up, my knees were all buckled. And I was like, I put the bar back, and I was like, fuck this. And I walked out, and I was like, I'm not into the gym. This place sucks. And I
Yeah.
just went right back to bike riding. And here we are. And then somehow I got influenced. I wanted to go down the States, and my brother, and somehow the BMX thing said to me, you know what? These BMX guys should be learning how to get stronger and injuries. And I went down there, and I was already starting to get, I guess I got a road bike, and we actually went and pedaled around California. And I went down and found this guy, met me at this college. Um, he was like a consultant at the time, and he could help you find your path. And I found this guy, and he was like, what are you into? And we started talking about it, and he said, you should check out this kinesiology thing. He's like, I don't know really what it's going to be, what you can use it for. And then, I took it all, and then got into the training and moved back to Canada after 5 years in California, and went back, and I worked in the movie industry to make some real money. That's a whole other story. Well,
Wow.
if you're interested, you and I on a personal level, yeah, I got to work on the movie sets and work for musicians, big brands. And just by being at the right place at the right time, I became friends with Arnold Schwarzenegger's nephew, and Patrick Knapp. He became my good friend down there out of a fluke. I didn't know who he was for like 5 months, and he
Yeah.
was next to me in my school, and he introduced me to Gold's Gym, World Gym, and he got me into the circle real quickly. And Arnold's gym allowed me to work with big celebrities, and I made enough money from those clients that I could come back to Canada. And I blew a bit of money for a few years trying to be cool and bought a Harley and did all this shit. And then finally, my uncle called me one time and said, "You're just being ridiculous." And I listened to him. He was a real, I really looked up to him. And he said, "You should go up to Canada and you should start a gym, and you should save some money. We have a strip mall we're building, and you can have, there's a space up there that's going to be available, and you could go in there and put a gym in there." And so I pulled my shit together for a couple of years and saved some money and was able to go back to Canada and actually finance the thing at the age of like 23, most of it on my own through the money I made in the film and movie industry.
Yeah.
And as a trainer, I was more like a therapist on movie sets.
Uh,
And and then I went up and I started this gym in Canmore, Alberta, and just was surrounded by world-class athletes, people who won gold medals in the Olympics, and skiers and hockey players and Nordic skiers. And then, like I told you the story before, I got introduced to a motocrosser and bought a motocross bike, and the rest is history. I guess kind of explained that earlier, that how it kind of just migrated to where I'm at now. But yeah, I never really. It's why I don't take it for granted when people aren't really gym people, when they're like, I'm not a, but I will say this. I told this to somebody at Pink Bike recently. There's so many people that mountain bike is so kind of like edgy snowboarding. And it's like you don't want to be seen as a gym guy. You don't want to be seen as a fitness guy. You're like kind of punk rock
yeah.
to some people. But the reality is, if you ride mountain bikes, you're into fitness. There's
Yeah.
no way you and I are going out and we're climbing these big. I don't even care if you're on an e-bike. You and I did it at what Val d'Fossa recent, last year or whatever. And if you're going out there and you're putting in big miles and your heart rate's up over 100 or whatever it is, you must enjoy some physical effort. And unless you're just purely a shuttle guy or you're purely a chairlift guy, but even then I would argue you're still into outdoors, you're still into fitness. So
Yeah. 100%.
I think that's enough story about me, but that's my BMX into moto at the age of 30, and now here we are. So
No, it's a
still riding.
cool story, Todd. I like to, hear, a lot of us that haven't become a Samuel or a Loic Bruni, we've still had some, good stories on how we've got into it and, made our passions into a job and done some really cool stuff. So yeah, that's really interesting to know. And yeah, you keep on doing what you're doing. You've got some amazing athletes under your books and you're working with some great teams. And, I'm looking forward to seeing how the team with Aaron progresses, that new team. It's looked really interesting to me. Great to see Aaron back flipping hauling ass at the last couple of races. So I'm excited to see how that is. Um, but yeah, just mate, congratulations on an amazing life up to this point. Keep doing what you're doing and brilliant, mate. Well, you have a good day
Okay.
and I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, bud. See ya.
Bye. Bye.
See ya.
Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that interview with Todd. He's a great dude, and as you can see, he's done so much in the industry and throughout his life so far. He's done some really cool stuff, and he's always a great dude to hang out with. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Really helps with everything. And if you feel like you would like to donate a coffee, please do that. Helps Maya with all the work that she does behind the scenes. So thanks very much and hopefully see you next week. Cheers.